everyone. This afternoon, I, Mary at Harrison's Hope, have the delightful opportunity to introduce a very special guest. Her name is Antonia Rathbun Lindsey. She is a retired therapist who has generously offered up her time to speak to an area of her expertise, which is art therapy and what it can and does do for our loved ones living with FASD. Antonia is also an author of a fabulous book called How to Parent Your Porcupine. And I have to tell you, I have gone back, there it is. I have gone back to this resource many, many times, not just when I have been moderating a caregiver group, but when I've been preparing workshops for professionals and also for caregivers. And I have shared these tips and tricks. I have used some of the knowledge nuggets in this book. And it was really important to me to be able to share Antonia's wisdom with a broader group of like-minded people. So, without any further ado, welcome, Antonia. It is an honor to have you on our call today.
Thank you so
And
much.
we welcome
Thank
you.
you. You. Thank you. I am very grateful to be here and honored to be here as well. It's a privilege. I am a retired licensed registered art therapist and licensed mental health counselor and board certified professional counselor and disability specialist, which is a lot of alphabet soup. But the biggest, most important thing was I'm a family member. And so I had two hats. Well, a complicated professional hat and the main hat, which was, living. So the goal today is to be able to introduce how art can be of use, And I want to thank everybody for being here and thank you for your interest. And what I hope to do is check in and see kind of where people are. Usually when I start with the word art, people in North America tend to think art as a thing.
Yes.
And really, and so I want to ask if people have ever used the range of art materials or kind of what people are familiar with in terms of art.
So maybe we can put that in the chat, folks. Attendees, tell us in the chat box, type it in. What do you consider art to be? What does that look like for you? And what materials have you used?
That would be really helpful for me to know. And I'm looking now because I'm barely figuring this out. I'm very
Sorry, I'm
comfortable
in a
talking
call.
about brains and neurology, but
Yes.
I'm not as tech savvy as many of you. I'm very old. So forgive me.
So
It says
I
new chat. So I'm going to say yes to that. And then anyone who wants to say something, if they're familiar with art materials or a favorite art material, anything like that, let me know what it is.
yes, I
And
will. Sorry about that.
go.
Yes.
I'll keep
Thank you.
going. There's a thing called the expressive media continuum because we're talking about art as not a thing, but art as a way. And in Parenting Your Porcupine, in this book I held up, although I think it blurred out, I'm not sure if people could see the title. It
There
might
it
have blurred,
is.
but we'll put it where my face was and see if we can get it in range. It's not
Yeah,
going.
it's not a fan, but that's okay.
But in Parenting Your Porcupine, what I'm talking about is how art was useful for kids who could show things they couldn't say, and adults who used it to manage things that they couldn't organize in their bodies, but somehow the art could contain that in a way that words weren't getting there. Okay? So we're
Perfect.
talking about how art serves that purpose. Drawing media, beads, they use found materials, recycling. Yes, yes, there we go. There we go. Because when we talk about the range of art materials in the expressive media continuum, what we talk about is firm materials, most controlled, like pencils and pens and things that you can have very precise marks with. And then all the way to fluid materials. So I'm going to read off what that curve looks like. And if you start at the most controlled, fixed media, fixed materials, you'd have collage, where you tear or rip out or cut pictures out and arrange them. Pictures or words. Collage, pencil, pen and ink, markers, crayons, oil pastels, charcoal, chalk pastels, paints, plasticine, which is that modeling material that it's kind of stinky, but plasticine is an oil-based modeling material, but that doesn't get fired. And then gray clay, which is white clay or a number 10 clay body that dries white, and you can fire it in a kiln. And then red clay on the very furthest end of the fluid, least controlled materials. And this is a little bit, I'm going to read just a little thing about that. What we're looking at is art materials on a sensory spectrum from most to least controlled, fixed to fluid properties. And children with functional differences can have strong reactions to how changeable a material is. And this can be either positive or negative. Fluid media of paint and clay are highly expressive but harder to control. Wet, soft, mobile sensory properties may invite or they may repel based on one's threshold for stimulation, either internal, like emotional responses that come up, or external tactile preferences. For instance, the moisture, the stickiness, or other sensory qualities that the material has. In general, fixed media, we're talking about collage, pencil, pen and ink markers, those really controllable things for drawing. Fixed media promote organization, meaning internal structure and containment, because their controlled nature is rather precise and unchanging. And if you've ever painted with watercolor or tried those things and had colors suddenly go together unexpectedly, some people really like that experience, and some people are like, no, wait, it's not doing what I want it to do. Oh, no, I'm ruining my picture, And so there's a natural inclination that all of us have towards materials. And so art therapists, we're trained both in psychology and in the fine arts and the use of all of the media. And one of you mentioned found materials as well. If you think about sticks and rocks and quills and leaves, all of those things can be used sculpturally in a natural environment as well. And they all have properties too. And it's very interesting to notice what a person's body is drawn to. And then instead of trying to have a particular outcome, what we do is we learn with art therapy, we learn that art is a visual code. It's like picture talk, okay? And the process is what's important, not a product. And so there are no mistakes per se. We can run into things that go differently than what we expect, and we swap. We don't stop. There are all kinds of ways to swap in art in a way that allows people, without words and without trying to change people's ideas, to use our hands and our eyes to adventure into a world where we touch and we show things that are going on. Okay? Some people say to me, I'm not artistic. And I kind of love it when they say that, because it's a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding we come to, honestly, because oftentimes we've run into well-intended adults in our lives who felt uncomfortable about making marks on paper. And they taught us to make stick figures or things like that. They might have tried to alleviate their own discomfort with using different sort of materials. But the long and short of it is, if we learn to write our name, we can do art. And what I mean by this is art to make marks on a page, on a big page or a little page, to make any marks at all, uses 36 neuromotor movements that are the same ones we use to write the alphabet and write our names. So art isn't demanding anything physically of us that we don't already know how to use. It's
That's
just
amazing.
we're not used to following where a line wants to go, or seeing where a color wants to be next to another color, you know, and we think of art as a thing instead of a way. And so really all of this is about what it is as a way. So to get right into it here, if we're talking in pictures, we're talking with the body. And I want to ask Mary to be the boss here and show, and I'm going to show you some examples of how that works.
Let me know when you can see it.
We've got, the reason my book is called Parenting Your Porcupine is because I was doing an art therapy group for a bunch of kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And this is way back in the early 1990s. And there was a boy, he was Ojibwa, and his family was traditional. And they were an adoptive family, and they were absolutely the sweetest. They were so loving, and they had been to therapists, and they'd taken parenting classes, and they'd done all of this stuff, as happens in adoption. Okay. And they'd been told that their son had had a hard start, but would be growing out of things, growing out of the difficulties. And so this little image was made by a 9-year-old boy. And what his group that he was part of was called the Muscular Mice. They called themselves the Muscular Mice. And he had had a really hard day one day. And I'll tell you about that later. But this particular one, this is a porcupine when he's calm. Okay? And because he's the one who started making the images of a little porcupine. And so he would use that, he would make that image, and then he would show what was inside it, what color was right there in the middle of the porcupine. Okay, let's go to the next picture. Well, there's a porcupine. You know, they have good days and bad days, right? Kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders can have good days and bad days. And when it was a really bad day, he was all hackles. And he had aggression towards people in the group. And when it would happen towards people in the group, he'd get over in the nesting area. I had a nesting area in there. He'd get over in there. And I'd go ahead and continue art with the people he had just mean-mouthed or been rough with. I would keep helping them, and he could wait until things calmed down. Well, he sometimes couldn't calm himself down until everybody else in the group was gone. And he had gotten himself up out of the nest, and he'd gone and used a stair stepper. And he pumped up and down on the stair stepper and the stair stepper in the office until he was tired. And then he'd come over to the whiteboard and he'd draw this. And this was the porcupine having a bad day. And I'd like to ask you to guess what color was in that middle of the porcupine there. Anybody want to take a guess?
I'm going to say red.
You know, that's what I was expecting. That's certainly what I thought was going to be in that kid's tummy. And you know what it was? It was black.
Oh,
It was black. Now, black is a very interesting, that's an interesting thing to put there because depending, black can be a beautiful ceremonial color
yes.
for formal occasions and all kinds of things. It can also be a color we associate with despair. It has many contexts. For a little 9-year-old boy, he put black in that porcupine, and then he did this.
Hmm.
It, it was a bad day. And it came out, it took about a minute and a half to come out. Now that's, for a speaking child, that's a long latency.
Yeah.
And that's how much trouble he had being able to identify. His hand could identify it, his body could identify it visually, just like that. His words, he had alexithymia, which is the uncoupling of words from ability to label sensations in the body and express feelings. And so the words came way after, way after. And that was his routine. That was one of his routine problems, is because without language, he'd be up against things that frustrated him, and it would go physical because he didn't have ways to engage it verbally and fend off or navigate or negotiate social situations. Let's go to the next slide. What this wonderful and brilliant little boy did, well, there's the porcupine having a bristle attack again. And if people wouldn't talk, this is what the porcupine would look like when people would keep talking at him. It would get worse. So finally, what he did was he made a picture of a porcupine all curled in a ball, covered. And that's when the color in the middle of the porcupine would change and it would go back to blue, kind of a bluish green. And then he was cool again. He said, cool down, cool down. So the thing about it is that he was very eloquent visually. It was very rapid. It was very easy for him physically to show those things. The problem was people expected, because he had speech and because he could read and he could write, they expected him to be able to label these things because he was 9 and he was still having the struggles that someone half that age would have, being able to identify sensations in the body and then broker those with adults. Okay? We call that problems with interoception, the ability to code physical signals and make sense of them. And let's go to another example. This was with an adult. This is an adult who is about 34. And this is what she said. She said, there's a wall in my brain. Now, I didn't ask her to make a drawing of her brain. She came into session and she'd had a really, really stressful episode going on. And I had no idea what was involved with it. She came in, she sat down in the chair, and she was jiggling like this, and her leg was beating against the table leg like that, and she couldn't say anything. She had a stony expression on her face. And I said, your body looks like it's kind of something's going on. Can you show me? And this is what she made. Now, if you look at this drawing, you might see the charcoal around sort of the outside edge there. And then it looks a little bit like gears and pulleys, doesn't it? A little bit like gears and pulleys and conveyor, little belts, rubber belts between the conveyors and pulleys and things. But what drew my attention is the bullseye. You see that bullseye there? Let's keep going. Because she worked really hard on this picture. Let's go to the next slide.
Wow.
And by the time she was done making this picture, her body was calm and she was breathing like this. And she'd been holding her breath. She couldn't get a deep breath. So I said, let's see, what would you like to do now? And she picked this page is a 18 by 24 inch page, much bigger size. Okay. And you see what happened to that bullseye? Remember the bullseye from the first image? First, she drew a box to try and contain it and put it in. And then she exploded the bullseye into the page. Now, here, she wasn't talking at all. She was letting the media, the material, provide the holding tank for all of that stress. And what she said was, as we unpacked this, she said, there's this girl and she says this about me and they want to kick me. She's going to try and get me kicked out of the program. She was worried about being thrown out of her residence for some behavior that someone had accused her of. She was focused on feeling like she was a target. Do you see a target there?
Definitely.
I do. You know, let's go to the next slide. She found that painting felt so good that I took it was gouache paints, which are blocks of solid tempera, and they were in big squares in a big pan. So you can order them not in bottles, but actually in hard blocks in a tray. And I sent that home with her with large paper like that. And when she got stressed, she would paint bullseyes. And what she would do is she put this one on a stand. So she was providing support to it. She's supporting her stress explosion there. And then she kept painting, and you notice how they get lighter and lighter? As she's winding it, she's using the mandalas, and she was winding down the stress in her body. After she'd wound down the stress in her body, she was able to go to her case manager and say what she needed without fleeing back into the streets or doing some other impulsive behavior. Her previous impulsive behaviors were stealing other people's food or their belongings. Okay? And when she did this, she managed the impulses and was able to translate things back to words and get help. She was able to do what was called help-seeking behavior instead. Okay? Next slide. As the sessions went on, we focused on what signals were in her body. Because once she had some sense of control in the media, she was confused how somehow she could make sense of it in the art. And I said, well, let's see what's going on in your body. And so she drew this. And the little writing is head, shoulders, chest, and then stomach. And I notice in the stomach area, it's black again. You see that? It's very interesting. And in her chest, it's blue. And what would happen to her was she would get icy cold. When she was jiggling in that chair and she was stressed out, she was having adrenaline surges, like stress hormone, cortisol release. So she felt cold and she couldn't breathe. She would get a tightness in her chest and she couldn't breathe. She felt cold all over. Let's go to the next slide. So this is what she found. She drew this other picture, and this is actually a diagram of how her stress would get stuck and what she would have to do. And this is when she said, stress is like a big red flag. I lied, I ran, I hid. I didn't know how to ask, how or when to ask for help or what kind of help I needed. And so that red flag, that's when she would use the art. She would get that sensation of, uh-oh, and she would race to her room and use the art. Now, I find something very interesting about this drawing. There are individuals who have such serious injury as a result of the prenatal alcohol that they have a thinning of the corpus callosum, which is the band of fibers between the two hemispheres. And if you look at this drawing, do you see two big scribbly places and then a band between them? I think that's pretty interesting. I think that's pretty interesting because it is as if what got stuck for her was information going between her left hemisphere and her right hemisphere and her frontotemporal area to be able to keep executive functions online for her. When she was most in distress, executive functions were simply not available to her. Problem solving wasn't possible until she could get the physical agitation down. And art allowed that better than talking to anyone, better than it was better than anything else she'd found. Because when she spoke, if she spoke when she was in that state, she would verbalize all kinds of things, and then people accused her of lying. It was actually confabulation. She was straining to throw word pictures out there about feeling targeted or hurt or scared or upset, but she couldn't find the labels for that. So she'd tell these word stories that were just all over the place. They were all over the place. And people thought she was just trying to con them. No, she wasn't. She couldn't be precise, is what it was. She couldn't express things with precision about what was happening to her body until things were organized in her body again. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is what became her stress plan, was the bullseye wind down drawings. And she would even take a little sticky notepad and she'd make bullseyes on it and hand it to her case manager as code when she needed to meet with her case manager because stress was blowing her up again. So she even would pass this code to a few select people who were helper people to say, here's my red flag, here's my red flag. She would make a little bullseye on a sticky note and hand it to them. And it was very effective. She said, I use the art when something is stuck, and then I get help from my mentor, my counselor, or my mom. I do what I can and they help me. And when she just needed to have time and occupy herself in some way that was not intrusive with other people or to just self-soothe, she would take this template. It's actually a little graphic template, and she would make her own pictures. And we talk about in fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, we talk about the symptom of perseveration. Well, here's an example of how it's positive. She's repeating the image, but she's coloring it. I think somebody really missed the boat in not having her design pretty wrapping paper, because I think it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, you know? So she went from seeing herself as someone who didn't understand her body and didn't like herself to someone who was creating art and able to take things that bothered her and turn them into something beautiful, which was a pretty big shift in her life. Okay? Art as part of stress planning.
Incredible.
Well, it's a pretty powerful thing when we would expect to be able to get there with talking, but no, it was not, that's not how it worked for her. And for so many of the other people that I knew who had hyperarousal as a symptom, where it would overwhelm would wash over them and hit them so hard, so fast. It was like their guts were attacking them, you know? And when you don't like what's in your body and you don't like what's outside of your body, where do you go? Well, they go to the art. Okay, let's do the next slide.
Oh, I might be. Hang on just a second. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a moment. It looks as though, Antonia, it has jumped on you.
Ah,
That's all of them.
that's all of them?
Yes, ma'am. Those are the ones
Okay.
we're sent.
Okay. Then I'll talk about another kind of managing impulse control, and that was volcano drawings. And the
Ooh.
reason they were volcano drawings, not paintings, is because I'll use the example of an 8-year-old that I was working with who had impulse control problems and would set fires or become sexually intrusive with younger siblings. So his family was looking for safety mechanisms. And many people in the talk therapy world would think, oh, well, you give them paints and then he can vent all his feelings with paint. Well, no. The reason that an art therapist would never choose paint as a starting point for a child with impulse control problems is because if he starts in on paint, it could end up in a complete muddy mess and he could feel a loss of control, not a sense of his own power to show what he wants to show. So he used very large paper as the container. So 18 by 24 again, pretty big. So he could use his large muscle system, not just his fine motor system. And he used he used a combination of oil pastels and I'm missing the English word. It'll come to me in a minute. Oil pastels and colored pencils. Colored pencils. That's the word I'm looking for. Colored pencils. And so he would make volcanoes that were blowing up. They were big black cones and blowing up with molten red lava. And he would scribble and scribble and scribble and he'd press on the paper and he'd just be, really working hard at it and making all the magma and all the smoke and all of the, and it was a lot of body work for him to get that across. And when he would do that, it would relieve that pent up sense of pressure. And he looked at it and he said, that's a strong volcano. And I said, it is, isn't it? It's big. Yeah. Yeah, it's strong. People would be scared of that. I was like, yeah. Because what he wanted power over. And instead of doing power to, he was exercising power over others because he didn't have a lot of mechanisms for exercising power to create something, do something different. And people had tried to stop him. And what all of this was about was swapping that force that was coming out of him so that it could be contained. Again, we were using art for expression with the other person. We were using art for containment with this kid, right? So that's the joy of art materials is you can use, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what the kid is needing to accomplish, you would use different materials and range of materials in order to help the body accomplish what it needs to manage stress load, regroup, and have a good outcome from it. Because if you increase the tolerance for process, you're having conjoint attention to sensory experience, right? That proceeds and leads to exploration of content. Focus on the emotional and cognitive experience the person's having. Does that make sense?
It does. Antonia, I'm going to jump in and say it explains to me why when we direct or give the opportunity in materials like clay, just as an example,
Sure.
um, that molding, that sculpting, the pressure, the
Work.
twisting, the
It's
unreleasing, the
body work.
work, it explains to me why a child can come into a session very dysregulated and borderline aggressive and work through it with the material and come
Exactly.
out the other side not only feeling better about themselves, but knowing that they can safely release those feelings, those big, huge feelings. I've seen it in my son. I,
Ex-
I'm I'm a huge proponent of this, and I don't think people realize the power of it.
well, they don't. I mean, creative arts, expressive arts therapists, creative arts therapists, we're a sub discipline. You know, people are just starting to figure out who occupational therapists and art therapists really are. And a lot of our therapists, a lot of art therapy is now being understood in terms of its utility with the veteran population, for example.
Yes.
But we've been working with brain injury and stroke rehab and cancer and school-based services and geriatric populations with dementia. I mean, we work with all different kinds of things, and we're all specialized within those fields for being able to do that stuff. And it's just that my thing was traumatic brain injury and specifically um, prenatal exposure, drug
Yeah.
and alcohol exposure, and other neurotoxins. I had some kids with fetal hydantoin,
Okay.
um, oh yeah, oh yeah, a bunch of neurotoxins. But there are media moves for managing process, and I wrote about this in the chapter about artist communication in
Yes.
parenting your porcupine. And here's the thing. In short, fluid materials like paint or clay can elicit emotional expression and heighten internal sensations. That gives emotional release. If you're heightening something that's going on inside, you're expanding it. Okay? Fixed materials like paper, pens, printing, or carving media, like carving on soapstone, things like that, can promote organization, internal structure, and containment, metabolizing emotions. And so, depending on with a kid who's way shut down and is never aggressive, and is the kid who's hiding in their closet in the dark, you know, because they're so overwhelmed after school and they can't do their homework and they can't even eat and they can't, you know, they're just completely withdrawn. There, you want to help emotional expression. With a kid with the impulse control problems and tendency towards bristle attacks and aggression, you'd want to use the other side of the continuum and the other strategies. And we can always vary things and work towards the middle. And we can challenge and see if it's going to go a little bit in this direction or that direction. And we can follow their lead because their hands will show us. Their body state will show us. If they're blanching or blushing, if we watch their visual display, the movements they're making with their hands. How hard are they working the clay? Or are they having trouble working with a stylus on a flat surface? Do they need to be up at an easel? So there's more trunk work involved so that they can express the power over the vertical surface this way. There are things we can do to support them without ever using a lot of words.
It,
It's
it,
kind of magic.
it is. It feels so much like magic. Um, I, I've used it for myself before I knew that I had been exposed in utero. And I realize now the amount of time I spent
Mhm.
with medias, all kinds of different medias. I think that's why this resonates so much with me. Now I
Nourish.
understand that it was my outlet.
It's nourishing.
Yes.
It feeds our sensory system, our hands and eyes and breathing, what's in our stomach. Here's an exercise people might want to do if they want to get themselves ready to do some art with their children. It always helps if we put our body through it first. So
Mhm.
here's something I would recommend for people who are less familiar with letting their hands and eyes play with the media continuum. Take the range of those materials and pick just the most controlled ones and make an image of a hard day. Okay? Then, using another part of the continuum, pick a different set of materials and make an image of a good day, an easier day. Okay? After you've done it, notice what your body's doing. How does your body respond? How does your body respond? And if you want a really big challenge, take a memory that's a particularly tough memory, but one that you've visited before, that's not the most terrifying one. But take a hard one and show that with lines or shapes, figures if you want, but you could also do it just with scribbles and lines or shapes. Okay? And see how you feel when you do it. Some people are very surprised at the level of physical stuff that opens up at their body when they just let their hands do the walking. And the reason it's important to do that is because that gives us some idea of what it might be like for the person we're going to invite, right? We want to be ahead of that if we can. So we have to know where we are and how we can calm and collect ourselves and be in an okay place. So at the end of doing those drawings, do one that's the safest you've ever felt. Make what an image is of the safest you've ever felt, the best, most comfortable, and portray that. Okay. And then feel that. Notice what colors you use, or what kinds of lines you make. Or if you're using sculptural materials, what shapes you make, how you touch the material. Do you pinch it? Do you pull it? Do you press it? Notice what your body is doing. Even if you never say anything about it to anybody, follow what your body is doing. Learn to follow the body. Because the body is talking to you. And this is a way that our brain can see what's going on in our body. Because sometimes our body knows first. Sometimes our body is already registering things. And I can explain the neurology of that if anybody's interested. There are neurological reasons why that is. So if anybody's interested, let me know in the chat, because I can describe why that perceptual map is working that way. How are
Yep.
people doing with this
So,
information? How's it
Beth,
going?
pop your question in the chat box if you're able. We just had someone with her hand up, but I'm pushing her over to the chat.
Cool. Let me see if I can find people. Are people back? Ah, are there people?
Yep.
Live people?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Because I
ma'am.
can lip read. I can lip read. I'm deaf, but I can lip read you.
So, If people are comfortable, you are welcome to turn on your video screens now. I just want to remind you that we are recording, so I want to be respectful of privacy.
Mhm.
If you don't want to put your video on, you can type the question in the chat box. But
There we go.
I personally would like to understand, how does the body sense and know before the brain does?
Well, I should be specific. Before our mind, the brain knows, because the brain is the thing that's controlling the
Right.
hypothalamus, the thalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. That's what they call the reticular activating system. That's the hub where our heart rate is controlled, our breathing is controlled, our sense of connection to information that has been startling or scary for us happens. It's where fight and flight, if people are thinking about trauma focused perspective, it's where the fight, flight, fawn, freeze, flee, it's where all of that comes out of. It's the reflex system. And that is happening at an autonomic level. We don't have to ask our body to hold our breath when we're scared. It does it automatically. So that's already happening because of that system in the brain being on. What happens when we're doing art is that part of the brain is on. And what we're doing in the art is we're containing that. And then the mind, the frontal lobe, looks and says, oh, look,
Hmm.
oh, look, look at all that. And then we begin to see sometimes what we're feeling, what we're deeply feeling or thinking in a way that we couldn't access any other way. Does that make
That's
sense?
amazing. That
Yeah,
is absolutely amazing.
it
Um,
is. We can
the
take
brain's
our
a
own,
powerful
we can
tool.
take our own body x-ray,
Exactly.
make
Exactly.
it
I'm thinking,
ourselves. Even
I
better,
think,
make it ourselves.
no, but understanding our brains and our bodies and how they interact, it's a game changer. And it's not just a game changer for how we support our loved ones. It's also to help us understand ourselves better. Uh,
We can be working really hard not to be angry and have no place to put it, especially if we've come up in a community that said that it's
Not
it's
okay.
not it's not okay, either because you weren't supposed to act out in school, or maybe people in church are not supposed to show anger, be not angry towards one another. There are many traditions in which people don't want anger to drive the bus, and
Yes.
that's understandable. And yet and yet it's there as part of our fear system in the brain that helps us know when we need to protect ourselves. And so we can't, I mean, what do we do with that fuel? We need a place to put it. We don't want to burn it off in a way that we are not happy about or that makes our circumstances worse. And yet it's a created part of the way the organism works. It's there for good reasons.
Yes.
It's just, what do we want to do with it? And art is all about expanding all these options that turn out to be, actually, they can be really wonderful. Art is descriptive, not prescriptive. You know what I'm saying?
That's a great way to put it.
So
It really, really is.
we can really go ahead and describe what our experience is of the world in that moment. And that's the perceptual map that we've made. Oh, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm thinking. Ah, oh, oh, I need more of this or more of that. It
It's a
gives us,
really gentle way of opening it too,
yeah,
to bringing it to light.
yeah, yeah. And we could show it to somebody if we want, but we don't have to.
Yeah,
We don't have to, you know? Um, so I like for people to experiment with those exercises first before they help their kids, because that
true.
way you can practice with the range of things and
Yes.
become more comfortable in your own body so that when things happen for the kids, you can observe and watch, and you can lean in and show interest. What I like to do is I like to say, we don't interview the kids or the adult, we interview the art.
Art.
We look at what our hands just did or what their hands just did, and we go, oh, well, there's a lot of red right over there. Oh, there's this blue line there. If we both together look at what is there, we can talk about what is there.
Yes.
And it's not like someone looking at me and saying, well, what are you feeling today? I mean, like, nightmares of talk therapy, right? Everybody's stereotype of what the worst kind of counseling is. What are you feeling? It's there is a whole different way to go about this. And the thing is, kids will look at their art or look at what they made. And if there is language coming to them, if there's something they want us to know, they'll tell us. For example, going back to the muscular mice, those lovely kids. One day we did body outline drawings. So we had big, long butcher paper, and they lay down and they each helped each other draw body outline drawings, and then they filled them in. And they filled them in with paint, and some filled them in with markers, all different. One little girl, she paints it, and she got to the face. She was painting on the face. And suddenly she put a paintbrush down. What's so? I hate bath time. I hate bath time. My mind is going, is it the temperature of the water? Is it, what am I going to hear? You hate bath time. Yeah. Yeah. And she starts rubbing her face like this. She's just been painting on the face. Her hand goes up to her face. She's rubbing on her face like this. She goes, yeah, I don't. When mom washes my face, I don't like. She's trying to get out. I don't like when mom washes my face.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the other muscular mice are going, yeah, I don't like it either. And so we figure out what's going on. It wasn't the temperature of the water. It wasn't that they didn't like mama doing it and wanted somebody else to do it. What was it? It was the terry cloth of the wash rag.
Yep.
And after she's rubbing her face like this, she says, I said, oh, so that doesn't feel good on your face. Is there something you like on your skin? What do you wear that you like on your skin? What is yummy on your skin? She said, my nightgown. And she was talking about her soft knit cotton nightgown. It was a sort of gentle flannelly knit, soft and cozy.
Soft fabric.
Soft fabric. And so I said, well, do you think your parents need to know, or you just want to work on this in here for a while? No, we want to. So they wanted to let the parents know. They let the parents know. The parents made different washcloths. Everybody came back the next week. It was like, I love baths, happy about their baths. And they're taking baths and they're doing that. And some of them were doing baths for calming.
Yeah.
Some of them were doing them for compression, for neuromotor compression on the proprioceptive system, the system that tells your body where it is in space, because that sense of being squeezed, being held by the water was very calming and organizing to them. So there was one child who needed almost an hour in lukewarm water. Her parents were afraid that she was going to catch cold, but she needed almost an hour every evening in tepid water to be able to try and go to sleep at night. And it wasn't about hygiene. She would take her shower in the morning. This was about calming after the day of stress in school. So, yeah.
Amazing, though, that her body clearly showed her what she needed.
Well, she was painting on the skin, and then suddenly she put the paintbrush down and the hand went up to her face like this.
Wow.
So the brain is working.
Yes.
The frontal lobe had to figure it out, and we had to get there. But the sensory system, the parietal lobe, the occipital, parietal, and hippocampus, and hypothalamus and thalamus, they were all talking loudly.
Yes.
And then we got there.
Just amazing.
It's kind of fun. It's kind of
Yeah.
fun. We can learn a lot. Yogi Berra said this. We can observe a lot just by watching.
It's true. Sometimes we just need to slow down,
Well, and
right?
that's the thing that art does. Art can take 45 minutes. We're just sitting there and they're working away. Does that mean that we should talk to them? I usually let people work. And meanwhile, I'm watching the color of their skin, the pallor, if they're blinking more, if they're clearing their throat or having any kind of ticking behavior, if their movements are getting calmer or more agitated. I'm watching what's going on in the body because my job is to observe. It's not to stop the symptom or the behavior. It is to know where it is and then watch what moves we can make with it that are going to follow and lean in the direction the body needs to go to be safe and comfortable again and to feel in charge again.
I think that's what I like about it is it gives the individual that power back, right? And we all want to be in control and more so in control of ourselves, right? And what a
It's not
beautiful way to give that
reward,
gift.
it's an internal reward. We like
Yeah.
to be able to manage our own body car.
Yeah.
We like to be able to know how to drive this thing. And when
Agreed.
we have a condition that sometimes throws us off, which is involuntary, we don't want it to do that, and yet it's doing it. You know, I can remember something on one day and then the next day I can't remember. Nobody looks in the mirror and says, you know, when I grow up, I want to have that happen to me. None of us who live with any kind of chronic condition really like the fact that we have days that things work a little better and days that things don't. But that's part of what we live with. And so then we have to find our way to feel like we have a sense of agency and we know what to do when. We know what to do when. We know how it works and we need to know what to do when. And art really helps a lot in helping people be able to get at what they can't put words on.
What I love about this, Antonia, and I mean, I've only dabbled in it. I am not an expert, but what I found reassuring with your book was that I could take a section of it and follow it. And I could see, um, I could see the output. I could see the conversation my child was trying to have. And this is coming from someone, again, who, while I have a high IQ, my executive functioning has been tempered with FASD. So I feel strongly that the way you presented the information in the book is very much like you presented it today. And you make something that many people are intimidated by art. Many people are
It's a really
intimidated.
sad thing in North America. People think art, oh no, that's for artists.
Exactly.
No.
But but your
Because
book,
we all learn how to write, so no.
yeah, but your book explains it just the way you have today for us here. And it makes it more approachable for those of us who are afraid of it. And
Oh.
when you do embrace the concepts, as a caregiver, it really is another tool in your toolbox of supporting our kiddos. And for me, it was a big part of why I was so grateful to have you join us today, was because I want caregivers to know that this is very powerful. This is very helpful. Um, in supporting our kids and helping them understand themselves and in helping them feel safe to communicate in a way that occurs naturally if it's encouraged and supported.
Well, I'm glad that it can be useful. And here's an example. I have seen people take a piece of art that they didn't like, they felt just came out wrong, like that. I have watched them cut it up and make it into something else.
I love that.
So what if there's no mistakes at all?
Yeah.
Right? It's just, okay, well, how do I work this? Well, okay, I could rip it apart and make something else with it. They could take bits and pieces that they liked about that piece and put it on another piece of paper and glue it down and completely create something else new with that. I mean, there are no really wrong answers. How about that? No one's grading it, and there are no wrong answers.
Isn't that amazing? Again, it's just being open, right? It's again, you make a scary thing seem reasonable, sensible, and approachable.
Well,
And
I'm so glad. It's a tool. It's a tool that can make a difference.
Yes.
When words are hard.
Very definitely. We did have a question about what the name of your book is, and I had put it in the comments, but I'm going to put it again because I like being repetitive.
It's called Parenting Your Porcupine, a toolkit for children with FASD, other drug effects, and neurodiversity.
And again, it is a go-to book for me, both as a caregiver, but also as someone who likes to offer more than just peer-to-peer support. I like sharing things that work, things that help me, and things that help others. And it's a beautiful thing. I find it connects my son and I on a completely different level.
Oh, that's so exciting. There's a wonderful opportunity. Another thing people can do is
Please.
you can sit across from one another and you can make either an abstract or a realistic, depending how you like to make marks on pages or sculpt. But you can make, I'm gonna make a portrait of you. It could be an emotional portrait or a physical, but you can say, I'm going to do you and you do me. Okay, let's play.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And and since there are no wrong answers, what we can learn is what people like, what they don't like so much, or how things work.
Again, it's not something people think of on a day-to-day basis. And yet it's a tool that can be used every day. There's always media, there's always materials available. We just have to be open to it. And I think, again, it's an opportunity that we're giving caregivers and other professionals to really jump onto. I'm just doing a quick time check. We've got about 20 minutes. I'd love to open up the call. Do folks have questions? If you wish to put your videos on and show your beautiful faces, you can. Let me find you, Victoria. And let's see if you can unmute. There we go. Hi, Victoria.
Hi. Um, I love this. I have a couple neurodiverse kids in our house, but at different age ranges. I was talking about we have tons and tons of art materials here. And we love using them all. My question is, when should I know whether I should just transition to art therapy, like as another therapy for our son, rather than just like a way of life kind of thing? Like, because we do a lot of art here and we do a lot of things with our hands and to encourage expression, but when would I see it as a another thing to kind of just on board for him. Like right now he's doing speech and OT in school. So I don't want to like over therapize him, but
Exactly.
when would it be like a benefit for me to add that to our toolkit?
Well, I think if you're already chasing all of those things as a caregiver, my first concern, having been a parent of neurodiverse kids myself, is there's only so much we can do in a given day, and we want to give them everything. And yet, there's only so much chasing around to appointments we can do before they're exhausted from all the different things we have them in.
Mhm.
And we're exhausted because we can't chase any more stuff. So part of this might involve just, if you've already got a lot of materials at home and you're already set up, you can notice if there's any change in that, if they're not wanting to use the materials anymore, if they're avoiding certain materials and only picking certain ones. There's no wrong way to go about it, but it sounds like you're providing an awful lot already there that they can use. If something were to get really, really stuck in terms of an increase in real distress, if you notice a radical change in the imagery where things are, they look like there's no more color.
Right.
Dramatic change in the palette.
Okay.
You might want to talk to a professional.
Okay. That's a good
Because,
point.
or if you see the use of the materials and it starts turning more into destruction than construction.
Okay.
Because there are ways to use destruction in art therapy, but it might be nice to have a professionally trained art therapist on board around that stuff, so that you have a big you have a protective bucket for that. If it gets dramatically bigger, harder to manage, changes intensity, a big change in intensity. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. If you see a big change in acting out behavior, like a massive difference.
No, that's great. He's only 7, but like we want to encourage the constructive stuff. So he does have destructive tendencies. So that's a good point to watch for. So
Well, I'll tell you a story. It's from the book, but this is a family that I knew in the Midwest. Their son, he was 14 when this was happening, and he was really physically strong. He was super hulky strong, and he'd come home from school every afternoon, just absolutely ready to blow. And he'd come in, and his mom would be worried, "How are you?" And he'd be mean mouth and upset, and he'd go in his room, slam the door, and he'd destroy his room. And his mom got really sick of this after a while. She was like, "Oh, holy moly." So she met him one day at the door of the house. They lived on some farmland in the Midwest, and she met him at the door, and she handed him a peanut butter sandwich, and she said, "Look, I can see already, school, you're not happy. Okay, eat this, but stay out here. I'm not letting you in until you've eaten your sandwich." And she locked the door. She went around to the picture window and she watched to see what was happening. Stuffs the sandwich in his face, just wolfs it down. And then he just got really ticked off, and he went and he started picking up boulders in the family's yard and throwing them to the ground. And he was just hurling these boulders to the ground. And he was really, forceful and scary, right? But he's hurling these boulders around, and he went on for 45 minutes, most people would be like, they'd be finished at 10 minutes. 45 minutes later, he's still hurling boulders. So she went out in the yard and she went, "You are so strong. Look at you. You know what? If you can lift those, you could make a rock wall. We could have a rock wall. Could you do it over here?" And she positioned him at one part of the yard, and he built a stone wall all around the front portion of their yard, not their entire farmland, but their main big yard and garden, a stone wall. He showed pictures of it at a conference. This kid grew up and he became a radiology technician. And the way he got through his training as a radiology tech, he showed me. He had all these little journal books that he'd filled with pictographs. And he made a pictograph of every one of the procedures and the name of it underneath. He made his own radiology encyclopedia for all of the procedures he had to do with all of his patients. He had full fetal alcohol syndrome. He was extremely friendly. And he learned exactly what the ritual was that you do in taking photographs, in doing the radiology work. And he was great. He was a radiology tech. That was his job.
That's amazing.
So there you go. So
Yeah.
just never underestimate a good destructo. Little destructors can help us in so many ways. They can learn to use a sledgehammer on the right stuff. They can, for example, good use of that, of a nice mallet, a big rubber mallet. You can take a wash bin, a plastic wash bin, and you can get clay, like a number 10 clay body, which is a white clay. And if it gets too hard, you just water it down, and then you smack the tar out of it and water it down to turn it into slip, to remake the clay into malleable clay. So if you have dried out clay that nobody wants anymore, and it's real mineral clay, you know, a little destructo can be a great potter, because you need a lot of physical arm strength to throw pots and to smack up clay and to use a bat and slap the clay on it to sculpt it. You need a lot of strength for that. You might be a clay kid.
Yeah, our little guy would actually love that as a mallet and clay.
Yeah. We've done the slip with dried clay,
There
and
you go.
my kiddo loves it and still does. He's 16, and we didn't discover
Pour
it
it into
until he was 10.
molds. You can use the slip. You can pour it into a mold and fire it, and make dinnerware that you can all eat off of.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
I mean,
To
you can
me,
do wonderful things with ceramics. Wonderful stuff. But for little destructos, clay can be really lovely.
I would love to see, with a show of hands or with a react response, did you enjoy what Antonia has shared with us today? Here we go.
Oh,
Right.
thank you.
It's been an
Thanks.
amazing session today. I know our caregivers and our professionals that were kind enough to join us too. We've gotten a lot from this, and your time has been so valued and so treasured. I hope I can invite you to come back and join us again,
I would
because
love to.
I know that there's so much more we can talk about.
We could talk about face masks.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? That would be lovely. That'll be the next topic for sure. To those of you on the call today, I want to thank you for taking the time in the middle of our Canadian daytime. We're going to tuck Antonia in for the evening when she's done. Antonia, would you like to tell folks where you reside? Just so that people understand.
Oui, je peux discuter ça. I live in France.
So we are lucky enough to be able to be connected globally with talented, treasured people like Antonia.
Oh, well, thank you. You are treasured too. And anything I can do to help as things go along, let me know.
I love
And
it.
find the book on Books By. It's
Yep.
also on Amazon, but I like Books By because Books By is Australian, and
Yes.
and if I may say this privately, I'm not the biggest fan of Jeff Bezos personally. It's the only one thing I'll say. So I
Always lovely to have alternative sources.
I think working with diversity is so important. We've got to resist monoculture in any way we can, which is
Agreed.
another nice thing about art.
Yes.
Yeah.
The time has flown by today, and you've given me more things to think about. I think, having the opportunity to speak with you and listen to you this afternoon in person, as much as I love the book and I have used it, it's dog-eared. That's why I won't hold mine up.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you. Mary, I'm so honored. I am so honored by
it. Well, it means a lot to me that we were able to bring you on to share this with caregivers, because it's not something that is always top of mind. And if we're lucky enough to be already using arts and materials to help our kids express themselves, we don't necessarily realize the gift and the benefit that we're giving them, right? It takes someone.
We often underestimate ourselves.
Yes,
in terms of
precisely.
all the wonderful things we're accomplishing.
Yeah. And I know myself, my own personal experience is that, our kids do get a lot of therapies. And some are really, really beneficial. And I am not downplaying anyone's choices, but some are far more beneficial for those of us who are neurodivergent. Folks, therapies that work for neurotypical folks aren't always as conducive for those of us who are not neurotypical. But I personally see the benefit in art therapy. And it's something that I know every single one of us on this call can do. Right?
If people can give it a try, that it could open up a lot of new things. And I think it's nice to have some new tools in our toolkit from time to time.
I agree.
I'm so honored to be here, and thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Take what you need and leave the rest.
Exactly.
Take what you need, leave the rest. You know your kids best.
I value your time. Thank you so much for this afternoon. We will have you back, my friend. We will have you back.
Happy to do it. You just email me anytime.
Oh, that's wonderful. So again, we had Antonia Rathbun Lindsey, the author of How to Parent Your Porcupine. It was a wonderful afternoon of learning, and let's go put it into practice, folks. Let's go give it a try. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you'll be back for next month. Stay tuned. Flyers are coming out. And Antonia, much love to you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.